Maxwell Robinson, and I'm a junior here at Mamaroneck High School. Last year, while at a program over the summer, a friend told me about how her school held a TED Talk. And we spoke about it for a while, and I became instantly fascinated. She spoke about how impactful it was to her community and her school. An hour later, I applied for a license to host this event. After hours of work, several months later, and the help from so many people, we are here. So, welcome. I hope you enjoy the show, and Ms. Carnival will come on right now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And I would like to extend a welcome to all of you as well. This is Mamaroneck High School's first ever TEDx talk. And it's all thanks to Maxwell Robinson, who applied for a student grant through our Mamaroneck Schools Foundation. And it is a special thank you to our Mamaroneck Schools Foundation for making this happen. They have sponsored it, and they do so many amazing things for our school, and this is just one example. Today, we are so fortunate and appreciative to welcome such esteemed presenters, including the professionals and our own students who will be speaking with you today. And without further ado, our MC for the event and our own Mamaroneck High School mother, Miss Erica Hill. She's an anchor and national correspondent at CNN, where she has covered a wide range of domestic and international stories. A Peabody and Gracie Award winner, Ms. Hill also co-hosted the Emmy-nominated CNN Sesame Street Town Halls tackling COVID-19 and racism. So, without further ado, and the real reason why you're here, I'd like to welcome, with a warm welcome, Ms. Hill, our MC for today.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here today. Also very proud MHS mom, as was just stated, and a Homix mom. It is such a treat to be a part of this event. I am in awe of what Maxwell has put together. When he first told me about what he was planning, and I was thinking through the timeline in my head, I thought, wow, that is not only impressive, but really ambitious. And he has done even more. Thank you all for helping to get the word out to the MHS community, to the town, and thank you all for being here to support him and to really be a part of this important discussion today. You know, growing up, I remember hearing the phrase, think global, act local. I'm guessing a lot of people my age remember that as well. And while that idea endures, as I was thinking about today's event, what struck me is that the reverse is not only true, but it's incredibly effective. So thinking locally can really lead to action on a global level. In fact, that's where some of the most meaningful, impactful change begins, right here on the local level. The challenges facing our planet, our society, can feel overwhelming. I often think of this in the context of natural disasters. So in my career, I have covered a lot of hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, and we in this community, so many of us, lived through the destruction, the devastation of Ida. Maybe you are some of the people in this town who are staring at the contents of your home on the sidewalk, and you're wondering, how did I get here, and how will I ever get back there? The task to clear out, to clean up, to replace, to find a place to sleep for maybe that night or months to come, it is overwhelming when you couple all of that together. But broken down, one challenge, one problem at a time, it begins to feel more manageable. Difficult, yes, but manageable and even doable, and that also allows you to make some space for hope. So when you're close to a problem or an issue, you not only experience it more deeply, but you can also experience those solutions in a more profound and impactful way. As a journalist, I know how important it is to have local news organizations, which speaks to the same issue. They need to be there when it comes to holding officials accountable for their promises, when it comes to shining a light on a community's needs, highlighting our strengths and our successes, and those closest to each one of these issues, well, they know the stories, they know the people, they know how to communicate that best, and also how to address them. Getting the word out, like we're all doing today, it raises awareness, impact, and reach. So think locally, act globally. And this is one of the reasons I was so excited when Maxwell reached out to bring these big ideas and to highlight some of the big ideas we already have here in town, to get them all together here on the stage at MHS, to highlight this great work, and frankly, to see where it can lead all of us. So this afternoon, you are going to hear from innovators who are harnessing the power of the wind, changing the way that we fly, using their art to inspire greater respect for this incredible planet. You'll hear from young scientists who are so focused on soil and its vital role in mitigating climate change. And you'll hear from local entrepreneurs who are maximizing our maybe somewhat lazy recycling habits to give back. I am confident that you will leave here today inspired. To get us started, I'm thrilled to introduce my friend and colleague, Bill Weir. He is CNN's chief climate correspondent. He has pretty much the most coveted job at our network, next to Stanley Tucci. He is not only a brilliant storyteller, but he is a wonderful human. He is a man who cares very deeply about this rock we call home. So please direct your attention to the screen. And Bill.
Greetings, Earth lovers, and welcome to the TEDx Mamaroneck High School Conference. I'm Bill Weir. I cover climate and the environment here at CNN. I also have a show called The Wonder List on Discovery Plus, where I go to the wonders of the world and wonder what will be left of them by the time my kids are my age. And I'm so enthused, so proud to help kick off this first ever TEDx event in your community. I really believe we're all going to be climate reporters sooner or later. This is a story that touches us in every aspect of our lives, and caring about your local water and air and quality of nature, biodiversity, all the bottom elements that's sort of the bottom of our pyramid of needs that matter now more than ever. And the first step in protecting these things is having conversations like this conference. So Maxwell and his team has a great lineup of speakers. I know you're going to learn a lot and leave enthused and energized and ready to connect on these themes going forward. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I have a conflicting assignment, but I can't wait to hear what you learn, and I can't wait to join you on the next one.
So the great Bill Weir. I can say I spoke to Bill yesterday when he was on assignment covering a lake that was dead that has now come back to life, flooding some $2 billion worth of crops. So it's a really important assignment, but he did say to me, please say hi to everyone and tell them I wish that I could be there. For more than 20 years, Brian Martin has been a leading entrepreneur and investor in the renewable energy industry. Prior to renewable energy, he held similar roles in different areas, offshore oil and gas, also shipping, and the energy industry. He's a guy who knows his stuff, and he knows what it means to move into this space. He was the chairman and the founder of Deepwater Wind. It's the company that built the country's first offshore wind farm. And if you've ever been to Block Island, you have seen that work off the coast. It is pretty remarkable, and they're massive if you get up close. Today, Brian is the executive chairman of Desiree. It's a company that he co-founded. It's one of the largest independent solar power producers in the US. He's a problem solver. He is an innovator. He's also a Larchmonter, yay. His two sons attended MHS, and he is really an integral part of this community. He's served on a number of local boards and has also been active in coaching local youth sports. So if you please welcome Brian Martin.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Don't usually hear such nice words like that, so thank you. Today, I'm going to go through some basics on renewable energy. I've spent the bulk of my career in the energy complex, I'll call it, and not all of it has been in such wonderful places in cocktail conversation. It's a lot more interesting these days doing renewables than it was when I was going on offshore oil and gas rigs. That was pretty interesting stuff too, though. So what I'm going to try and help convey today is something really straightforward. Think basic. Think about the basics. Think about the fundamentals. Sometimes we think about these things in such a big picture that we forget to think about what are the real drivers, what's really happening. So I'm going to go through, if I can do this switch here. There we go. A little bit of background from me. A little bit of basic industry drivers. A little bit of a case study on Block Island. And then I think we're doing questions. I'm not sure. We'll ask Max afterwards. But I'd be happy to answer questions afterwards. This is an eye-dizzying chart, right? This is the energy complex in the United States. You don't have to take in what all of it means. What it says, there are inputs on the right side, on the left side, and there are uses on the right side. So energy gets produced and energy gets used. In the middle, up there in the orange, that's electricity generation. That's the power business. Power itself has to come from some energy input, whether it's the sun, natural gas, somewhere. And power has to get used. Power on its own is not really useful. It's great on lights, it's great in cars, but you can't do much with power on its own. So it's in between. The power business in the United States is massive. People don't always understand this. The power business is larger than the entire petroleum business combined. It's bigger than the entire natural gas business combined. The one that people often find most surprising, it's bigger than the entire transportation sector combined. The power business is big. It's also changing. This is a very simple picture of renewable energy. So you've got hydro, it's been around for a long time. You've got a lot more wind, and you've got a lot more solar. Why? Why is that coming on? You'll see that this is starting around 2000, which is when my story starts. I was working for JP Morgan in 2001, and I was investing in energy businesses. And I was asked to look at a project to buy a nuclear plant outside of Manhattan. Actually, it's in Westchester, the Indian Point nuclear plant. It was built in 1962. Its first nuclear license expired in 1992. And I thought this is a great business. It provides about a third of the power to Manhattan. That's a great franchise, right? Well, turns out it was going to go offline. Nuclear plants are designed for a 30, 40-year average life, as are most of the coal plants in the United States. And as you can do the math, it was built in 1962. So that would have made the investment in that plant probably not a great investment. Thinking a little bit entrepreneurially, why don't I look at what's going to replace that power? Well, replacing power in something that's built that close to the city was hard. We weren't going to build a new natural gas plant there. So maybe we'll look in Long Island. Maybe we'll look in New Jersey. Turns out that's kind of tough too, because they're crowded. And you can't run a transmission line. Can you imagine running a transmission line through Mamaroneck? We had a difficult time getting an IKEA built 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's not going to happen. So I had done a lot of offshore oil and gas. And we have to run power lines out there. So I knew more or less what it takes to do that type of thing. We looked at Europe. Europe had been building some offshore wind. And it turned out that that was actually economic because the power prices in New York and Long Island are so high. So started investigating. How do we get leases to do offshore wind? Again, I had done a lot of oil and gas. So just get the offshore oil and gas leases and do them for wind. That should be pretty simple. And that's how I started transitioning to renewables. Interestingly, it wasn't just Indian Point. To Erica's point a moment ago, think local, right? I was looking locally, but also think bigger. Where else could there be a nuclear plant? Maybe it's easier in another market. Something's going offline and we can find this replacement power. It turns out, as you can see on this slide, most of the power in the United States was built after World War II, during a period of rapid economic expansion in the U.S. 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. The last nuclear plant was built in 1982, right? These plants are old. They're all retiring. There's a replacement cycle for all of them. All of the power plants in the United States that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s are going offline. And as you can see here with the gray lines, those are the coal plants that have already gone offline. And the blue and the black lines underneath are the ones that are still operating. You think they're going to go offline? I do. I do. So one of the points that I think is very important to understand is, first of all, a lot of these have gone offline, and the power has needed to be replaced. Second, a lot more are going offline. Today, the green on the top is renewables. The next two boxes, nuclear and coal, aren't going to be there in the next 20 years, just because they're old. If you have a car, you can drive it for a long time if you take care of it. But the more you drive it and the older it gets, the more expensive it gets to drive usually. And that's the same with power plants. This is just a natural life cycle, a natural replacement cycle. So within renewables, what's growing and why? Most people are surprised when they see how big the solar energy business is. Most of renewable growth right now is solar. Wind, which we hear a lot about, and I started my career in renewables in wind. So we did offshore wind, did an onshore wind company, and solar. But utility scale solar in particular is where all the growth is in renewables right now. So if you look at this, the green bars are utility scale. What do I mean by utility scale? Most of the projects that we do are in fairly rural areas, roughly the size of Central Park, to give you a sense of scale. Underneath that, you see that we have the gray bars. That's residential solar. And I'm not saying that residential solar is bad necessarily, it's just not as economic. And when you're in a replacement cycle, what is the thing that typically replaces the thing that goes away? The cheapest, most effective form of energy. And that is renewables. I'll show you that in a moment. In addition to the replacement cycle, we also see what people refer to as electrification. Cars are now becoming electric. People are trying to make all of our stoves electric. Computers, phones, all of these things. So the market is growing for green energy. Batteries. We can now move power from when the sun's shining to when the sun's not shining. From when the wind's blowing to when the wind's not blowing. So let's go through and talk a little bit about what's driving this. Right? The low cost. How is it getting cheaper? Well, this phone that I have has a lot more capability than it did 10 years ago. Think about your phone with the semiconductor that's in it is very similar to a panel, which also has a semiconductor. They're both semiconductors. So all the capacity increases, the utilization that you can get out of your phone, that's what's happening with solar panels. It's just becoming more efficient. The science is getting better and we can put more power through it. When you look at wind, something similar is happening. Oops, sorry. Something similar has been happening on wind. And you can see there's this thing called the cost curve. Solar is the one that goes from the highest to the lowest. Wind is on the left. Offshore wind, it's expensive, but it's also come down in its cost curve. Onshore wind that's at the bottom here. It's the cheapest form, and it has a good cost curve also, but you can't put onshore wind everywhere. Look at the nuclear energy. Nuclear energy has actually gone up in cost. Coal is flat. And when you look at this chart, you can see this is the cheapest form of replacement power. Not subsidized, unsubsidized. Without tax credits, without all the stuff that we hear about in the newspapers every day. This is just the cost curve over time. Pretty impressive. Why does this happen? Well, scale is what does it on a wind turbine. The bigger you get, the more power you produce. And it tends to be the case that while the cost goes up for a bigger turbine, the amount of power that it produces is a lot more than the cost increase, so that drives the cost down. This gives you a sense of size and scale. This is a typical offshore turbine, and that is a helicopter that's landing on it. And if you go to the Block Island turbines and you go look out at the turbines, they're beautiful. You see all the white and the little red dot on the back. That's a helicopter landing pad. And that's not a small helicopter. Each of the blades has the same wingspan is an Airbus A380, the largest airplane made. Each one. So imagine that plane going down the highway, or going down the runway, and the amount of power that that has, lifting all the people, the fuel, the plane itself, the luggage. Each turbine has 3 of those. Going about the average speed is a plane right when it's taking off. There's a lot of power that these things produce. They're very efficient. This is a picture that I took from an even larger turbine in Denmark. The one that's bigger is an offshore turbine. The one that's smaller is an onshore turbine. You say, why are the costs higher for the offshore? When you put things in the water, they get more expensive. But the bigger those get, the more offshore wind costs come down. These are my sons, standing on top of a turbine. Parental question on that one. But this is not meant to show you my sons. This is meant to show you a herd of cows. Can you see the cows in the background? Those are little tiny dots out in the field to give you a sense of size and scale. This is one of our wind farms in Oklahoma. So let's talk about how a wind farm comes to be. We're going to go through a case study on Block Island. So this was not the first project I worked on. We worked on a number of projects off the coast of Long Island that we were trying to explore, and all of them had various issues, but this was the first project that made a lot of sense for the local community, for the federal government, for technology and costs. And so we started in earnest in 2008 on the Block Island wind farm. It didn't come on until 2016. That's a long time. What were we doing over that period? Well, the first thing is there a need for the power? Do you need it? And the answer is yes. There's a replacement cycle going on in New England. All of the red X's are plants that are going offline, and there was no replacement power for those. So yes, you do need the power. Block Island itself had old turbines, generators, that were literally diesel engines. So they had home heating oil trucks coming over on a ferry to fill up the diesel generators, and the diesel generators were breaking down all the time. They had very high power costs, and they had a replacement cycle. Where do you put it? So we looked across the entire East Coast. On this side of the chart, you can see Google Earth image at night. And this was formative in my thinking about the offshore wind business. Pretty simple. Where do the people live? It's where the lights are. It's important to have something near the demand center. Well, where is the wind? The one in the middle shows you where the wind is. Red is lots of wind. Blue is not much wind. Offshore, there's really good wind, and it happens to be right near the population centers. Well, when you build offshore, you don't want to go in deep water. You want to be in fairly shallow water. Where is the shallow water? Well, it turns out, as you can see in the image on the right, there's a big flat shelf going all along the East Coast. Near population, there's really good wind, and it's a buildable area. Looks like we've got to go. So we did other studies. We looked at all the shipping traffic, all the traffic for boats that were recreational and commercial over a 15, 20-year time. We then looked at where all the fishing areas were. Where do people fish? Where are whale migrations, for example? Where are there military dump sites? So munitions, things like that. When you screen out all of these areas, you get one thing that people care about most. Can I see it? Can I see it? We've all heard about the Nantucket problem, where put it in Nantucket Sound and nobody wanted it. So let's put it offshore, really far offshore. Turns out when you stand on the beach, the curvature of the earth, you can see 3.8 miles. That's where the ocean goes away. The higher up you go, the further out you need to go to find the curvature of the earth. We put ours 25 miles out. At 25 miles on the top, you can see the turbine on the right. You can't see them because you literally are looking into the ocean. So this is the actual image that we gave to Governor Cuomo for final approval when he said, all right, all that stuff makes sense, but can you see it? We only came in with one thing, and it was this picture. He said, that is where our wind farm is. He said, no, that's a picture of the water. I said, that's the point. No, you cannot see it. Now, You all will say, well, boy, at Block Island, you can see it. There were a lot of reasons for that. That was a test project that was inside of state waters, and that was 15 miles offshore in comparable water depths to where we would be building farther. So Block Island you could see, but all of our other sites were going to be much farther away. So we came up with these odd-shaped sites. We went to the U.S. government and said, let's do this. They wouldn't do anything without the states being on board too. So we had to go to each state. So we nominated the sites, and we ended up with these sites that could serve multiple states. How did we do that? Well, we went to New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. And each one of them thought they were nominating the site. So you got 3 chances of getting a partner to nominate it. And we did. All of these were originally discovered in that screening that we did. Then you got to get permitted. We had 27 permitting agencies that we had to go through. And you can imagine that they don't all agree. One says, you can do this, and one says, you must not do this. It's incredible how often one agency wants you to do something and another agency prevents you from doing it. And so you have to get them to reconcile. You have to get a lead agency, and you have to get other agencies to defer to them. That takes time, but it's doable. Then you have to deal with all of the various constituencies. In the United States, we live in a balance of power. There's state government, there's federal government. There's local government, there's state government. No one place can say, do this, without somebody else balancing out that power and saying, yeah, but I'm concerned about the following. I believe that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because our projects become very robust. So we spent a lot of time with the fishermen so that we weren't interrupting their activities. We spent a lot of time with the various environmental nonprofits. So we learned that there was a lot of whale migration going through this area. We have to learn that. Then we were dealing with the Native American concerns. And there were some amazing stories about discoveries that we made as we were working with them to get their support and approval. Ultimately, Block Island residents approved this project at 86% approval rate. Think of anything in our economy in your day-to-day life that you can get 86% of the people to agree on. Then you had to build it. We didn't have any of the equipment here. We had to figure it out. We went to the Gulf of Mexico because these foundations look a whole lot like an oil and gas foundation. There were a bunch of companies trying to sell us great new things. We didn't want to have to reinvent that. So we went to the Gulf of Mexico and brought those up on a barge. Again, just being practical. So what do I learn from this? What do I want you to take away? One, growth of this sector, it's not that the public policy is bad. It's just that it's driven by something much more fundamental. There's real demand for renewables. The story I told you about Indian Point, the nuclear plant, the thing that turned me on to the need for renewables, that was 5 years before Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth. Our consciousness of global warming hadn't even started really. This was starting a long time ago. Social public policy matters. It's important. It's a fundamental part of things. But it supports the growth in an industry like this. Maybe it's not always driving the growth. Policy isn't just good. Policy can be harmful too. And the policy may be very good, but it has effects that don't help our industry. So over the last few years, for example, there have been tariffs. There's been a strong interest in bringing unions in, which is great, but it raises costs. And so these things are more complex than what we might read in the paper on any given day. The second thing, this is really important. I've been talking about technical stuff, some engineering stuff, a lot of finance. I'm a history major. I was a history major undergrad. You can do the math. You actually can do math. Keep it simple. Be practical. Be thoughtful. Learn to think on your own. History majors can do the math, and they can also understand the engineering. In many cases, success in renewables for me has been about not winning the argument, but being right in retrospect. Could we have pushed things through Block Island? Yes. It was better to be able to look back years later and say, you know what? That was a really good decision. I'm glad that we didn't build after October, because right whales were migrating through. In fact, the very last day of construction, we had a whale family come through and rub up against all of our turbine foundations. Like they were scratching their back. They swam around it for a while, checked it out, and they moved on. We had a self-imposed moratorium after October 31st. That was on October 39th. We didn't win the argument with the state to go and build through December. But in retrospect, we were right to have stopped in October. Finally, we hear all about subsidies and government, and we have this and we need that. Utility scale renewables don't need subsidies. We should do what we need to do to make sense. We have a replacement cycle. That's what's driving things. It is possible to do good. It is possible to do well. They are not mutually exclusive. In fact, in my career building renewables, what I have found is that the more you serve people well, the better outcomes you get, which then help finance the ability to do more. The Block Island Wind Farm did not take any government grants. We did it all financially on our own and lowered the prices to Block Island. That wonderful cycle of service, but also profitability. It was not an evil thing, it was a good thing. They fed each other. You can do good and you can do well. Thank you very much. So I can't see hands yet. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. So I can't see who that is, but I know that voice, and that was the voice that actually started the Block Island Wind Project by talking to Kim Gaffney, Andres. How are you, buddy? Good to see you, man. So the marginal cost of power going to zero, it actually is possible. I think it's unlikely, but one of the wonderful things about wind and solar is their fuel cost is zero. They do have maintenance costs. To keep these running, you've got to do a lot of work on them. And what we've seen actually is that renewable energy in places where we're producing 100% renewables at certain hours, the price actually has gone negative. And so you've seen places like Texas, places like Oklahoma, Iowa, for many hours a day, the price does go to zero for periods of time. And that's because you keep dispatching until you're making at least $1. So there are other reasons that the price goes below that. But yeah, I mean, the answer is it does happen. Will it happen permanently? Unlikely. But renewables, because you don't have to pay for any fuel, you will keep dispatching as long as it's even making 50 cents. So, you know, they do drive the prices down quite a bit. Other questions? Yeah.
What's the status of our grid?
Status of the grid, that's a great question. If you think about where our cities are on the coasts, they're highly concentrated. And when you think about where the power plants are, they tend to be in the cities on the water because they need cooling water. Nuclear plants, natural gas plants, and coal plants. The turbine is actually driven by steam. So the coal is burnt, heats up in a box, water pipes run up it, they turn into steam, and they make what is actually something like an airplane engine spin, turn, and that creates power. If you think about those places that aren't on the coasts, and there are big plants that generate power and then distribute it out. So in the Southwest is a massive nuclear plant called Palo Verde. It's 3,800 megawatts. That would be about 40% of New York's power. Okay? A big renewable project might be 100 megawatts. So So something even the size of Central Park is 10% of your average coal plant. So they're distributed. So the grid is not set up for all of these smaller plants. The location of new plants, of new power plants, is also different than where they were before. We can't build these plants on the water in big cities anymore. So they're changing. Having said that, people are often critical of the U.S. grid. It has one of the most efficient, one of the most effective grids in the world. It's a very effective grid. And we're actually 5 main grids, and those will probably stay in place. What's actually happening is that most of the new projects that come on are having to pay for the grid upgrades. And so that's another public policy, that we're subsidizing renewables with government federal money, but we're not spending that money on the grids. The government could easily go in and do that. That's a choice not to. And so whenever we do projects, we try and find the projects in the spot, in the grid that makes the most sense. And that's another example of the market working, common sense working, being basic, being practical. But there will be a day that we can't find those spots anymore and that major grid upgrades will need to be made, and the government probably will have to do some of them. It's a great question, though. Other questions?
Yeah, my question is about coal, because you showed that graph, right, about the cost of different things, and you're saying that, and I'm not sure that I really caught the last point you said about coal, that it's, I think you said something about that's still cheaper. I'm just wondering about the future, what you see, you know, how that is going to work out, this whole.
Sure, so about half of the coal plants in the U.S. have gone offline already. And when you look at which ones have gone offline, they've tended to be the oldest ones that have gone offline first. And the ones that are still operating are the ones that were built later. And now we're starting to see that later group start to retire as well. There are regulations that have come into effect that may accelerate the retirement slightly, and that usually has to do with the coal plants needing to spend money to upgrade their plants to take mercury out of their emissions, for example. And if they're already marginally economic, that might be enough to tilt it so that they go offline. Whether those types of rules are passed, those plants are going offline anyway. And so we've had about half the plants go offline already, and the other half are expected to be going offline over the next 2 decades. And the same is true with nuclear plants. There's a limited life that these things can run. And you've seen some policies that are trying to extend the life of these plants and at least have them as baseload as long as you can, and other policies that shorten it a bit. You know, there'll be a back and forth and tug of war on that that'll happen. But ultimately, whether you shorten it a little bit or lengthen it a little bit, they're going offline in the next several decades and have been over the last several decades. And I would argue that is the primary driver of why the renewable energy industry is growing.
How do you think that renewable energy will evolve or change in like the next 10 years?
So you're going to see some really interesting things happening in renewables over the next 20 years, 10 years. Batteries are going to become more important. Batteries have their own challenges. As anybody with a phone in the audience can attest, they don't all drain equally. They don't all charge equally. There are some complexities with batteries. They're not clean to make, for example. Hydrogen is coming into, I'll call it consciousness and technology circles more. And you'll see hydrogen as a storage mechanism for renewables more often. You will also, I think, continue to see the cost curve come down. And that's really important because many of the utilities that we sell power to are concerned about bringing ratepayer costs down. And they can do that when they add renewables to their system. So many of our customers are actually municipalities and co-ops. They're cities, large cities that own their power systems. And if we can go to them and they're paying $45 an hour for power, and we can offer them power at $35, they say yes. That can only happen if the price of new power plants is coming down. And so that continued innovation is definitely going to be happening over the next 10 years, and we have a pretty good technology map of how that's happening. And finally, I think you'll see a lot more of the production of the components that make a new solar farm, for example, or a new wind farm. Those components are getting built in the U.S. And so we're in the process of building a big solar cell manufacturing site in Arizona. And today that's in Vietnam, and in Malaysia, and in Korea. And as we bring those home, there'll be a lot more opportunities to work in the industry and not just work for somebody who owns plants. Good question. Anybody else? So I tend to think pretty practically. Nuclear is typically considered clean energy because of its emissions profile, but most of the nuclear sites that we have are keeping their nuclear waste on site. That's not particularly clean. That problem hasn't gotten solved. And so the more nuclear plants we have, the more on-site waste we have, or you're going to need to ship it somewhere. So that's a real issue in the nuclear industry. It's also really expensive. It's really expensive. It's the most expensive form of power that we can build. And so I think that makes it more challenging. There are different countries that have had different philosophies on it, and it's worked well in many of those countries. I think it's hard to say, nuclear is great, nuclear is not great. But what we have seen in the U.S. at least, it may be true that coal plants and things like that get built when nuclear goes away. But in the U.S., most of the nuclear plants that have gone off, and there haven't been that many yet, they've tended to live a little bit longer than the coal plants. Most of those plants have been replaced with renewables, and some with natural gas. So I guess we got one more question, and then that's it. But that's it? Okay. Thank you very much.
So fascinating, and I'm really excited we got all those questions, and we may have to, I just want to give you guys a heads up, we may have to limit the questions a little bit just because we know we have so many great speakers to hear from, and we want to get to all of them. So as we prepare for our next presenters, what I think is so exciting is that they are part of our community here as well, and they are the next generation, I would say, of those who are going to be helping us out. I'm just calling up their intro. Give me a second here. We're almost there. This is when you tap dance, do some jazz hands. I'm not a dancer, as anybody in here can attest to who knows me. I'm actually really klutzy, so probably a bad idea, which is good because we are just about ready with a little teleprompter. And here we are. So we're back. So you may have heard that the next time you get a takeout order here in Westchester County could be a little bit different. If you want single-use, disposable utensils or maybe a condiment packet, you're going to have to ask for it. So there was a law passed, it was passed, and it was signed into law that says you can no longer just automatically fill that bag with all of the packets of silverware and condiments and napkins that they can shove in there. Also, these single-use beverage stirrers, those splash sticks, those are no longer permitted in Westchester County either. In fact, if you want a single-use foodware item, you can ask for it, but they just need to give you only the fork, not the plastic package with the fork and the spoon and the napkin. And this is all part of cutting down waste by providing those individually. And these are efforts that had a lot of big help from students right here at Mamaroneck High School, because as we know, these local changes have widespread impact. Two of the voices who helped to lobby for this new law, part of that action that they took was helping to get other towns in the area to sign on. Well, they're with us today. MHS seniors Marion Karp and Larissa Bertini are members of the original Civic Research and Action Program here at MHS, what we all know, of course, is OKRA. They're also co-founders of Students for Sustainable Solutions, and they're going to tell you more about this really important work that they're doing. So please welcome Marion and Larissa.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests in the audience, I'm here today to draw your attention to a problem plaguing our daily lives: plastic. As we all know, plastic is a commonly used material. We use it from everything from food packaging to clothing. But it is becoming more and more evident the cost it has on our environment. Did you know that it can take up to 1,000 years for plastic to degrade into our environment? In fact, it is estimated that there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by the year 2050. But what exactly is plastic, and why is it so harmful? Plastic is a synthetic material made from a variety of chemical compounds. It was invented in the early 20th century and has since become one of the most ubiquitous materials on the planet. However, the very properties that make it so useful, its durability, strength, and resistance to degradation, also make it a major environmental hazard. When plastic is discarded into landfills or in the natural environment, it can take hundreds of years to break down. As it does so, it releases harmful chemicals and microplastics that can contaminate our soil and water, harm wildlife, and even enter the food chain. Plastic waste is also a major contributor to climate change, as it is often produced using fossil fuels and requires significant amount of energy to manufacture and transport. For the past 3.5 years, I and 2 classmates, one of whom you will hear from this evening, and one of whom unfortunately cannot be here, have taken a unique class called Original Civic Research and Action, a program designed to teach us to study and advocate for changes in policies that we want to see happen. For our Ochre project, my classmates Katie Loga, Marian Karp, and I knew we wanted to do something pertaining to the environment, and more specifically, taking on the urgent problem facing not just our communities facing, but the entire world, specifically plastic pollution. We decided to take on the fight against the plastic problem because we believe there are feasible solutions that would benefit our coastal community. In the initial stages of our project, we studied the harms of plastic and came to learn that only 9% of plastic is recycled, and the rest ends up in landfills or in the ocean. Plastic pollution is very harmful not only to the organisms in the water, but also to humans, who end up consuming a credit card's worth of microplastics per week as a result from the plastics breaking down. Plastic pollution also imposes significant costs on local communities and economies. For example, plastic waste can clog drainage systems, causing flooding and damage to infrastructure. As we studied plastic, our journey led us to create a toolbox of change to impose success and practice civic activism. Today, we are going to be sharing the tricks of the trade with you. Any impactful project stems from knowledge. We knew we needed to have a significant foundation of knowledge to embark on the journey, so that's where we began. In order to make effective change in our community, we began by looking towards communities near and far that had done what we were aiming to do. We studied communities such as Westport, Connecticut, and as far away as Aruba and Hawaii, where they were able to successfully pass laws either restricting or fully banning single-use plastics. We were able to meet with representatives from Westport who helped to pass an ordinance with required food service businesses to transition from disposable plastic food serviceware to compostable and recyclable materials. Similarly, in Aruba, they have fully banned single-use plastics. Our mentor, Michael Gottfried, is a paper distributor in Aruba. So he was able to give us firsthand insight on how policy can change day-to-day operations and the positive changes he was able to see in the ecosystems in Aruba. To facilitate change, the representatives from Westport, Connecticut encouraged us to work closely with business owners and gain an inside look into how they deal with plastic in their day-to-day operations and what change would be possible. Having received all this positive feedback from communities where the laws were successfully passed really helped to motivate us and give us hope in our ability to reduce single-use plastic in our own community. Therefore, we took the advice from the successful communities and began compiling a list of local restaurants to take note in their plastic habits by documenting their various plastic containers. From the 15 restaurants we surveyed, we were able to learn about our community's plastic habits, which was essential to learn because how could we fix a problem without knowing what was actually wrong? What we learned was that the biggest contributor to our community's plastic waste are takeout containers. With this, we were able to outline what the following steps of our project would look like. Marian will now describe in more detail our 1-month-long pilot project through which we set out to prove that change in plastic consumption in our community was feasible and that it would be welcomed by the members of our community.
Thanks to our research phase, specifically the interviews that we conducted with local municipal officials, we knew that to pass legislation or make change at the government level, it would be crucial to prove there is support from both the constituents of our community and the businesses that would be impacted by the changes made. As a result, the pilot project was born, which ran in June of 2022. To summarize, our pilot project consisted of working with 4 local restaurants and switching them away from single-use plastics to completely eco-friendly alternative products. To help the restaurants make this switch, we constructed a database of eco-friendly products that we provided to them, in which we tried to include the most environmentally friendly and cost-effective products. And we realized that restaurants choosing to partake in this initiative wasn't an easy ask, because we know how difficult it is for restaurants to lead the pack and make environmental changes when others are not. So we met with funders, and we were able to offer each of the 4 participating restaurants $500 to cover any additional costs that may have cropped up throughout this process. We also worked with these restaurants to help them implement an upon request only policy, which has become a very important policy in our project, and it is where restaurants offered cutlery, condiments, and napkins in takeout orders only at the request of the customer. Another aspect of this project was the surveys that we created for the purpose of taking the temperature of the community or measuring how they would respond to eco-change. We printed out QR codes and put them around restaurants so that customers could simply scan them with their phone and answer a few questions and provide any feedback they had on their experience. The results from the survey were overwhelmingly positive. Some noteworthy facts that we gathered from the 175 survey takers were that 96% of survey takers said they were willing to pay more to see eco-friendly products in restaurants. And 95% of survey takers said that they supported a targeted ban of the use of plastic plates, utensils, takeout containers, and straws. And 98% of survey takers said the decision of participating restaurants to test eco-policy improved their perception of the restaurants. There was also a place where consumers could leave feedback or comments they had, and we got overwhelmingly positive feedback in that space. One person commented, "I just ate at a participating restaurant, and I was so impressed with the eco-friendly products. It makes me so much more likely to eat there." Another person commented, "I ate at these places for the first time because of this project. Very impressive of these restaurants." Ultimately, through our project, we were able to make residents more familiar with eco-friendly products, promote a more environmentally conscious lifestyle throughout our community, and heighten awareness surrounding plastic pollution, which we were able to do through media campaigns. Our project was featured on News 12, in local newspapers such as the Larchmont Ledger, and on multiple local municipal social media accounts and other various news outlets. So this project wasn't just the end. It was only the beginning, where we moved into our legislative phase. After the conclusion of our pilot project, we met with the owners of the restaurants and conducted interviews with them to come to a full understanding of how the pilot project went from their perspective. The project was positively received from all the owners, but what specifically stood out to us was their appreciation of the upon request only initiative, and understandably so. Only offering cutlery and condiments at the customer's request saves restaurant owners money, as they are giving out less materials and therefore have to purchase those materials on a less frequent basis. These interviews with the restaurant owners promoted us to explore the upon request only policy to see if we could implement it on a broader scale, considering how popular it was for everyone involved. Around this time, we conveniently learned that a version of what we were working on, the upon request only policy, was being crafted into the form of a bill at the county level entitled the Single-Use Foodware Law. This law would require all restaurants in Westchester to only give out materials like utensils, condiments, and beverage stirs at the request of consumers, meaning no more automatically putting these materials in takeout orders. We were intrigued by this news and immediately knew we had to be involved in ensuring this legislation would become law for all of Westchester County. We immediately reached out to legislators Nancy Barr and Erica Pierce to learn about the proposed bill. We ended up consulting to them and offering our vast set of expertise, and we found a copy of this bill and were able to write feedback, comments, and tell them what we liked and what we didn't like. We were able to explore the upon request only policy during the pilot project and therefore offered the real practical experience of it to the legislators. Our meeting was quite meaningful, and we were able to share these thoughts pertaining to the bill and ultimately expand the bill and make it an important piece of legislation that we knew would be impactful for restaurants. After that meeting, we knew it was vital that we could do everything possible to ensure the passage of this law at the county level. So we went out and we presented the work we had done thus far, and we advocated for this legislation in our community. We first went to the Town of Mamaroneck Sustainability Collaborative and the Village of Larchmont Environmental Committee. At these presentations, we asked that the collaborative and the committee would request the passage of a resolution from the Village of Larchmont and the Town of Mamaroneck, respectively. These resolutions passed by the town and the village would vocalize the village and the town's support and thus help pass this bill through the county level. With the help of our mentors and teacher and the county legislators, we were able to indicate vast support for the single-use foodware law at the county level. We met with the Town of Mamaroneck Municipal Board and the Village of Larchmont Municipal Board after meeting with the sustainability committees, and we presented them our findings from the pilot project as well as the support from the various committees. Both municipalities passed unanimous support resolutions vocalizing their support for the single-use foodware law. And we also created a petition from Mamaroneck High School so that students could express their support for the single-use foodware law, as we know that environmental issues are especially pertinent among the youth. We gathered a vast number of signatures, and on March 6th, we went to the public hearing on the single-use foodware law at the Westchester County Courthouse. We made our points on why the law should be passed, highlighting the upon request only bill policy that we implemented during the pilot project. And then we presented our certified resolutions and petition to the Board of County Legislatures. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the legislators voted to pass the single-use foodware law, which was an amazing moment for us. We could feel everything we had spent months working on and all the research we had gathered coming to fruition at the county level, which touches a wide number of towns, residents, and businesses. The threat of plastic pollution and climate change is really a daunting one, but it is not insurmountable. The challenges we face are significant, but so too is our collective power to affect change, as we've learned. The youth of today have a crucial role to play in shaping the future of advocacy for our planet, and youth around the world are taking action to address the problems of plastic pollution and climate change. We must support and amplify their voices and work together across generations to create a more sustainable future. So let us all commit to reducing our use of plastic, recycling whenever possible, and ultimately supporting sustainable alternatives. Let us also demand that our governments and corporations take meaningful action to address the root causes of plastic pollution and climate change. Together, we have the power to make a difference, so let us act with the urgency and determination so that future generations can inherit a world that is healthy, vibrant, and sustainable. Thank you.
When will the law actually be implemented?
That's a great question. So the law was just passed in March, and we're going to be offering a 6-month grace period to the restaurants, because what we've really learned from this process is that restaurants want to be a part of sustainable practices, but they need time to adjust, and they need some sympathy with their ultimate goals of staying healthy as a business. So we're giving them that 6-month grace period to really find the products that work for them and train their employees, and they have that time. And then after that 6 months, it's expected that they'll have these policies, but then we enter the next 6-month period where our penalties are only kicked in at a halfway basis, which include fines upon offense. So that would be at a lower point for the next 6 months. So after that full year, it'll be in full practice.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. What is the cost difference between a plastic container and the equivalent eco-friendly containers?
It depends which product, but we found for, I believe it was a plastic fork, and for a bamboo fork, it was about 23 cents for one to one. But it depends, and if you're ordering in bulk or if you're ordering individual, it changes per product. Yeah, thank you.
So inspiring, right? And I love that we're going to see it in practice. So up next for us, the art of Francie Ashforth honors her family legacy of both land stewardship and art, as well as appreciation of, in her words, the simple beauty of it through observation. So she spends a lot of her time outdoors, hiking, fly fishing, studying land and water. Her work has been shown in Canada, in Europe, across the US, in galleries, and also in small museums. So she's worked in partnership on a number of books. I'm going to advance this a little bit. We'll see what I can remember from memory. There we go. In 2017, she published a portfolio of her prints. It was titled Water and Words. So you can imagine it was not only those prints, but also her thoughts on water conservation. She's also collaborated with a good friend on a book called Headwaters, and that recently won the National Outdoor Book Award, as well as 2 prominent design awards. And she's currently working with Orion Magazine on a project that's going to focus on the impacts of flooding. Her hope is that both her images and her observations on land and water will ultimately inspire respect for both the grit and the beauty that is found in landscape. So please welcome artist Francie Ashforth.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica. I am simply fascinated by the land. I'm an observer of the landscapes I find myself in, whether hiking, fly fishing, or breaking trails through deep snow. I research a great deal about land history, geology, water, and the flora and fauna of the land. I understand the importance of art within the environment and the role art plays in sharing ideas through imagery and storytelling. All art makes a difference. The visual arts, photography, filmmaking, writing, poetry, music, all of the arts convey unique forms of communication, both gritty and beautiful. Ideas get passed along between generations. Color is a huge component of art. Color can dictate our mood and outlook on just about everything we do. Colors have deep histories, origins that come directly from the earth. Color and pigments are important natural resources that have been integral in shaping our various cultures. Without natural resources, we simply would not thrive. We are without question a part of the landscape, a landscape that deserves our respect. We've taken a great deal from the land and are understanding daily the importance and need of giving back. I'm just going to touch on a few natural resource stories, specifically materials that I use in my studio. I always try and understand where my materials come from because I feel that having the knowledge behind what I use gives my work a lot more meaning. This is an image of just rocks and pigments taken from an eyewitness book of rocks and minerals. But I'm going to refer to a book. In her book, Color, The History of the Palette, Victoria Finlay travels to the far reaches of the globe to trace where certain colors come from. Her journey to the mountains of Afghanistan leads her to the heavily guarded caves where the highest quality lapis lazuli, right there, has been extracted for centuries. Lapis is a deep blue metamorphic rock that for eons has been coveted, worshipped, and mined. Lapis was first imported to Europe during the Middle Ages. When ground down, lapis creates ultramarine, the finest of blue pigments. It was often deemed more precious than gold and highly desired by painters such as Michelangelo, Vermeer, and Titian. It was so highly cherished that it was often called the blue of the heavens. Lapis is shown, yeah, if you can sort of see the color, much more famous than azurite. So anyway, I draw almost every day, and one of my other favorite material stories has to do with sheep and pencils. And I'm sorry I don't have a picture of sheep or pencils. During the 1500s in northern England, lore has it that there was a mighty storm that uprooted a large oak tree. When a local shepherd discovered the fallen oak, he peered into the ground and saw a glistening black substance. And unbeknownst to him, he had found the purest stash of graphite so far discovered in the world. The local shepherds began marking their sheep's backs with chunks of this dark gray stone as a way to designate their flocks. Graphite began to be used for many things. Ingenuity ensued, and string was wrapped around thin chunks of graphite to form the first pencils. By the 17th century, wood-encased graphite and pencils were manufactured with much the same design that we have today. News traveled, and the art schools of Italy, of course, wanted to import this new pencil. Graphite is a pure form of elemental carbon. It's shiny, dark, and gray, and very soft, and provided a wide range of grays and blacks for drawing, a tonal variety not found in silver point or Conte crayon, and much sturdier than charcoal. Pencils were portable and in time available to everyone. Pencils are still manufactured in northern England by the Derwent Cumberland Pencil Company. And I wish I'd known about the story of graphite years ago when I was hiking there. It truly is hard to imagine our lives without pencils, which brings us to paper. It's really hard to imagine where we'd be today without either papers or pencils. About 2,000 years ago, a Chinese court official mixed some bark, hemp, and old fibers with water, and after mashing it and spreading it out to dry in the sun, he had literally formed the first paper. It would take 300 years for this secret to make its way to what we know today as the Middle East, and another 500 years before the first paper mill was built in Spain. America didn't mill its own paper until the early 1700s. Paper is most commonly made now with wood pulp and recycled paper. Cotton fabric was just not the renewable resource that wood was. There is so much history to the manufacturing of paper, and if truly interested, I suggest you read Mark Kurlansky's book that's just titled Paper. In my studio, I use paper that has cotton content, rice content, and even paper that's made from recycled polypropylene pellets called UPO. Waterproof and durable, it's got a remarkably smooth surface, and a few of my paintings that I'll show here today are on UPO. Karst is a relatively new paper made from recycled crushed stone. It's also waterproof and durable, and I really do need to order some because it comes in notebooks you can put in a backpack. These are just some ingenious methods of recycling and repurposing that continue to make new resources available to us. But what about the role of art in actually helping to preserve landscape? There were a number of groundbreaking artists who helped do just that, and I'll mention a few people who were pivotal in combining both art and conservation, specifically here in the US during the 19th century, a time when the national parks that we all know so well were just beginning to become established. This is an image of a Thomas Moran painting. Thomas Moran of the Hudson River and Rocky Mountain School of Artists began his career as an illustrator, and he worked for Scribner's magazine. He chose to draw his images instead of the traditional methods of etching and engraving. These illustrations were the primary way of sharing the beauty of remote landscapes in magazines such as Scribner's and Harper's. Most of the general public back then did not travel long distances, and these publications were their only connection that they had to the images of faraway places. It's amazing to think that personal cameras weren't available to the general public yet. Large format cameras were cumbersome, not truly portable, and mainly used in indoor portrait studios. The Kodak company wouldn't promote its first personal camera until 1888. In 1871, Moran and photographer William Henry Jackson joined the U.S. Geological Survey on a 6-week expedition to the remote wilderness known as Yellowstone. Yellowstone, they were known as Yellowstone. By the way, Moran used graphite and watercolor in that piece. This is an image of Jackson had taken a photograph of Thomas Moran. I don't think you'd be allowed to do this today, standing at the hot springs that are along the Gardner River. This was taken in 1871. They visited over 30 sites and documented their experiences, and Moran sketched and took notes and painted, and Jackson hauled his large camera and hundreds of glass plates over rough terrain in a horse-drawn wagon. He was extremely ingenious when developing his work in the field, something not many photographers had attempted yet. Moran and Jackson were a creative team, and their paintings, drawings, and photographs provided visuals that went beyond written description, images of remarkable landscapes that easily persuaded President Grant and Congress to establish Yellowstone as the first national park in 1872. Edward S. Curtis was a very young photographer at the time, and this is a photograph of Princess Angeline, who was Chief Seattle's daughter. Curtis was, he was introduced to photography early on, and after moving to Seattle, he became enamored with the landscape of the Pacific Northwest. He first met Princess Angeline, a Chief Seattle's eldest daughter, in 1895. She lived on the edge of the lake right near Seattle. She was one of the last remaining members of the Duwamish tribe to live in the Seattle area, and she agreed to let Curtis photograph her a few months before she died. His early photos, including the princess, started to earn him a great deal of recognition. He was invited as photographer on an expedition to Mount Rainier, and eventually was chief photographer on expeditions to Alaska, the Southwest, and Montana, where he photographed and immersed himself among the Blackfoot Confederacy. In 1906, the banker J.P. Morgan offered Curtis payment to produce a series of photographs on Native Americans. Morgan, of course, desired to own quite a few, and he wanted 1,500 of these photographs. Curtis received no salary for developing the work, and Morgan's sum barely covered the travel costs. But for Curtis, the project snowballed into a 20-year passionate endeavor. He found extra funding and journeyed across the West and the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and British Columbia, and he lived with many tribes, recording their songs, learning their languages, and witnessing ceremonies when allowed. He noted stories, art, and everything about their cultures, and he eventually published 222 complete sets of photographs, with his introduction to each simply stating, "The information that is to be gathered respecting the mode of life of one of the great races of mankind must be collected at once, or the opportunity will be lost." This is a photograph along the Salish coast. It's called Homeward. Curtis had such foresight, and his work is a tremendous tribute to Native Americans and their land and culture. We can't go back in time to regain what is lost, but we do have remarkable collections of art that help us to appreciate what came before us. I was introduced to Curtis's photography as a young child, and those images have stayed with me forever. Whenever I walk the land, I try to imagine those who have come before me. There are many examples of how we need to better honor Native Americans and their ancestral lands. One that I'm familiar with is in southwestern Alaska, a place I've been fortunate to visit a number of times. I think of how hard the Yupik tribes of Alaska have worked to defend their ancestral lands and salmon culture against the impending proposed pebble mine. This fight has been ongoing for 25 years. With recent positive resolutions in place, perhaps their culture will be able to remain somewhat intact. Bristol Bay and southwestern Alaska are wild habitats filled with ecological diversity. They are the premier source of where the salmon we purchase comes from. Tribal elders, photographers, salmon fishermen, and ecologists have all shared their stories of this rich landscape. And they have reminded me numerous times to write yet another letter in support of both salmon and their way of life. The Yupik salmon culture and salmon nation, as it's called, is not only important to Alaska, but it's a massive ecosystem and a food source, frankly, for our entire world. At age 12, Ansel Adams received his first camera. It was an Eastman Kodak Brownie gifted by his father during their first trip to Yosemite. Adams was in awe of Yosemite's beauty and focused completely on capturing what he saw. He developed his first photographs with the Sierra Club and returned to Yosemite many times with more professional gear. The Department of the Interior eventually hired him to take photographs of all the national parks, and he traveled through many states to do so. At the time of his first visit to Yosemite was already an established park, but Adams worked tirelessly over his lifetime to protect the land surrounding Yosemite. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1980 for his desire to preserve landscapes he loved. As an advisor to the Museum of Modern Art, Adams helped establish the photography department, bringing photography to a higher level of institutional significance. Adams was mentored by the famous photographer Alfred Stieglitz. And in a letter to Adams, Stieglitz stated, "It is good for me to know that there is Ansel Adams loose somewhere out there in this world of ours." And that brings us to Georgia O'Keeffe. Stieglitz was married to Georgia O'Keeffe, and O'Keeffe and Ansel were, O'Keeffe and Ansel were great friends who shared a deep affinity for landscape. O'Keeffe shifted her time from New York City to the Southwest, falling in love with that vast arid landscape after a visit to Taos in 1929. She was enamored with the cliffs of red and yellow rock formations. She collected bones and skulls, and she eventually made her home at Ghost Ranch on land that bordered a friend's 21,000-acre holding. These friends, Arthur and Phoebe Pack, were some of our country's first environmentalists, as Arthur was the editor of Nature magazine. They used one of Georgia's skull drawings for the logo of Ghost Ranch and were enamored with her paintings. She spent a great deal of time exploring the mountains around her and was particularly taken by the light and colors of the desert. It was her home and studio for over 40 years until her death in 1986. And by 1998, her property was declared a national landmark. Today, Ghost Ranch is a retreat for artists, writers, and visitors, and its landscape is a dedicated Park Service national natural landmark. It's not hard to envision the impact O'Keeffe's work has had on us all. She's another remarkable artist whose work paid deep attention to the land. This is called Ram's Head with White Hollyhock and the Little Hills, and this is the Little Hills review from her studio, and that was painted in 1935. So what does all this have to do with our conversation here today, and how does this relate to what I do as an artist? Well, we are all concerned about the environment and about the footprint that we create during our daily lives. We all have different interests, talents, and passions, and the gift I received as a child was being raised in a large artistic family who spent time outdoors. My grandparents' farm was my early geographic center, a place that provided me with an important mix of land stewardship and creativity in a landscape that I knew really well. I read a great deal and have been influenced by many authors, but these words from Barry Lopez have resonated with me for years. To really come to an understanding of a specific American geography requires not only time, but a kind of local expertise, an intimacy with place few of us ever develop. If you want to know, you must take the time. This is a coastline image, a series of water studies I did. They're 30 by 30, and this one is a direct reflection on the southwestern coast of Alaska. My goal has been to take the time to get to know and study landscapes that intrigue me. I continue to visit the theme of the horizon line over and over again. A definition of horizon I always refer back to states, the line marking that apparent junction of earth and sky. And the apparent horizon refers to all of our individual range of outlook, experience, and knowledge. Ooh, that one's really hard to see. It's called Blueprint Waterline, and this is actually ultramarine blue ink. I've been fortunate to work with amazing writers, conservationists, river guides, filmmakers, curators, and artists. All of these experiences have enriched my outlook and helped guide me towards my next place of study. I will always be focused on water, watersheds, geology, and culture within landscape. And I'm fascinated by and have great respect for the ocean, but oddly I feel much more comfortable along rivers or up high in the mountains. This is an image of the Bigwood River, and it's a basalt canyons that we were floating through. And that's actually painted on Yupo paper. To me, some of the most starkly beautiful places are deserts and ancient inland seabeds. Fragile yet tough, these desolate areas, once overlooked, oddly hold some of the most coveted resources and minerals now used for technologies and devices manufactured today. I've studied areas of Great Salt Lake and areas of the Great Basin. I've revisited Mount Monadnock in southern New Hampshire numerous times as it was the first mountain I hiked up as a child. And this is called the Billings Fold. It's a geological, really amazing cliff on Mount Monadnock. Henry David Thoreau visited Mount Monadnock frequently, and it seems I've followed his path a few times up mountains and along rivers in Maine. During a 5-day canoe trip through the North Maine woods, I was fortunate to paddle with a group of artists and philosophers, and we discussed changes in the environment and followed the path that Thoreau took in the 1850s. We also saw rusted remnants of the logging industry as we floated south past Mount Katahdin. The North Maine woods are still remarkably remote and wild, but their strong collaborations between conservation and timber entities help maintain this delicate balance with this 3.5 million acres that borders Canada. I don't know, perhaps Thoreau's notes and observations in some way helped preserving these New England landscapes. Oops, we're a little off. That's a boulder from Redfish Lake. And this is done all in graphite. And this is graphite ink. I'm now studying the Snake River Plain in southern Idaho. Lava flows, prairies, basalt canyons, a landscape that was mainly formed during the Pleistocene's massive Lake Bonneville flood. These are the Shoshone-Bannock lands, rugged, vast terrain that they navigated so well. These lands also usher one of the largest antelope migrations in the US. These are the geographies I find fascinating, and I'm a magnet to the edges of places, to ecotones where habitats and cultures merge and share the most diversity in nature. I've borrowed a few words from Pam Houston's beautiful book, Deep Creek, because I too am an optimist. She says, and I imagine sometimes often we will get it wrong, but I'm not celebrating the earth because I'm an optimist, though I am an optimist. I'm celebrating because this magnificent rock we live on demands celebration. I'm celebrating because how in the face of this could I not? In a nutshell, to me, oh dear, sorry. That's the Camas Prairie. In a nutshell, to me, our future in conservation is about hope, respect, ingenuity, and knowledge. I share the grit and beauty because that's what I see as an artist. I suppose my goal is that my images will help instill a desire for respect that reminds the viewer to honor what this land continues to share with us every day. Let's appreciate this earth with integrity and commitment so in turn it can continue to help sustain us. And here is a lucky stone for all of us, and that's graphite on paper. Thank you. I think I have, was told 2 questions if anyone's interested in asking a question, so. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, sorry, gal in the front.
Hi. So I'm just interested because you study the land and because you do certain areas over and over again where you're studying and drawing. Do you think that by doing that, you're raising awareness of things in our environment that people might not notice, that, the wider public, and by bringing things that may have changed in the fact that you're depicting it at this time versus earlier times?
I think that's part of it. I think it's also, I just have to keep revisiting places, especially now since I'm studying a lot of places out west, and my main studio is here in Connecticut. And I seem to bring it back to my studio, but it's very hard to talk to people in New England about what's going on in the West, about the plight of water, about, yes, we're thrilled. There's a ton of snowpack this year, but that's not going to help Great Salt Lake in the long term. So, and wildfires. Very interesting. Listen to the news. There's a little fire in New Jersey the other day, and everybody was talking about how big it was, and all I could think about was the fires of the West and how those are. Some of them are closer to 1 million acres versus, 350 acres. So it's just trying to make people aware, I guess. We all live in a specific place that we know really well, but if we don't go visit other places, we don't get to know those places well. So maybe that's part of my challenge. It's definitely part of my challenge, for sure. Thank you. So. Okay, I think that's good. Thank you very much.
So beautiful. So our next speaker, Isabella Gurcho, is a junior here at MHS, and her passion for environmental science can actually be traced to her 5th grade capstone project, which was focused on microbiology. She is part of the original science research program here at Mamaroneck High School, and over the summer, she actually conducted an experiment using soil probiotics, easy for me to say, to mitigate climate change. And she did that over the summer at the University of Arizona in the biochemistry lab. She actually presented her study at the Regeneron Westchester Science and Engineering Fair, where she received the T-Town Young Environmentalist Award. So her focus on the importance of soils in mitigating climate change and their role in ecosystems is what she's really excited about. She's planning to continue her research into natural methods of application that can impact soil health and the ways in which soils are actually being used, or being impacted rather, by environmental changes. She's going to continue her studies at the University of Arizona over the summer, where she's looking forward to making meaningful contributions to the field of science. And so it's my pleasure to introduce you to Isabel Agorto.
It is undeniable that climate change is establishing irreparable damage to our ecosystems if appropriate action is not taken. In the most recent synthesis report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it was disclosed that by 2030, global temperatures will increase more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Granted, there have been mitigation measures adopted, but are we limiting ourselves to a certain sector? As an original science research student, I have sought out to determine different mitigation methods for climate change and preserving the health of our ecosystems. It is evident that solutions must be developed and supported to ensure a sustained future. Yet, one of these solutions may be right beneath our feet, but simply overlooked. This would be soil. Soil has become an emerging focal point for mitigation, and due to the interconnected nature of our biological systems, soil has faced detrimental impacts at the hands of climate change. Think about it. We rely on soil to live. Soil is crucial for human survival through food security and receiving appropriate nutrients. There has been countless studies that have demonstrated these slight increases in temperature have caused nutrient availability and plant biomass of crops to decrease, leading to an overall threat to our food security. One of the most serious threats to soil health is a decrease in nutrient availability. Soil influences the condition and quantity of crops, and being negatively impacted by environmental conditions has led to micro and macronutrient deficiencies. For instance, the nitrogen cycle is vital for the health and growth of plants.
nitrate ammonium stimulate plant growth and play a role in aiding nutrient uptake. Yet in recent years, increased levels of carbon dioxide have been found to disrupt biological cycles and microbial interactions necessary for these cycles to function. Specifically, the process of denitrification, a process within the nitrogen cycle, should be examined, as increased temperatures have demonstrated the enhancement of this process. This is the conversion of nitrate or nitrite in soil to nitrous oxide, an infamous greenhouse gas, which creates a pressing need for a solution. Ultimately, this means that there's less available nitrogen for nutrient uptake by plants and more nitrogen being admitted into the atmosphere. Furthermore, the phosphorus cycle is a critical component in plant growth and development, but as a finite resource, it is a limiting nutrient. In recent years, the impact of climate change on the soil phosphorus cycle demonstrated that increases in mean annual temperature have led to a decrease in soil available phosphorus. Phosphorus is one of the least mobile and available nutrients for plants, thus being able to conserve a pre-existing phosphorus-rich environment or supplementing phosphorus into an environment through application means can promote plant growth. To say it simply, climate change is making the soil sick. And just like humans, when we get sick or ill, the soil needs probiotics to function efficiently once again. This is where soil probiotics come into play. I carried out the experiment using soil probiotics to mitigate climate change at the University of Arizona under the guidance of Dr. Joseph Blankenship in the lab of biogeochemistry. The purpose of this study was to determine how a novel consortium microbial inoculant and biostimulant mixture X provided by a manufacturer affects nutrient availability and plant biomass. Now, microbial inoculants are bacteria or fungi that are added to soil to carry out specific functions to aid soil health. There are two types, singular strains or consortiums. Consortiums typically establish more efficiently than strains as they can survive competition. This can provide many benefits to the soil and plants, among them being increased available nitrogen, nutrient uptake, and plant growth. And while microbial inoculants are not directly applying nutrients, the microorganisms within the inoculant have the abilities to increase nutrient availability through biochemical activities. Moving on, a biostimulant is typically composed of natural substances whose main purpose is to stimulate pre-existing biological processes. These substances can be acids, extracts, biopolymers, inorganic compounds, algae, and microbes, and can serve as an alternative to fertilizers. Biostimulants have been seen to increase the mobilization of nutrients, nutrient uptake, and soil fertility. The parameters of this study were applying these soil probiotics in 3 different treatment types: the microbial inoculant alone, the biostimulant alone, and the combination of the microbial inoculant with the biostimulant. It was hypothesized that the combination of the inoculant with the biostimulant would be the most effective in increasing plant biomass and nitrate, ammonium, and phosphorus availability, while the biostimulant alone would be the least effective. Soil was gathered from a natural ecosystem and placed into pots where deer grass is planted into each pot. Each treatment had 4 pots of application, leaving a total of 12 pots. This took place in a controlled greenhouse setting over a period of 14 days. The plant biomass was measured on day 1 and day 14, while the nutrient availability was measured on day 14. The results indicated that there was no statistically significant differences between any of the treatment types and plant biomass and nitrate, ammonium, and phosphorus availability. Nonetheless, there were insignificant trends identified, with an increase in average plant growth and diameter with the application of a microbial inoculant and biostimulant. And then here's the other graph with average plant growth. And there is also a trend with the biostimulant application and increases in nitrate availability. Although this experiment demonstrated insignificant results, the implication of this study is notable. There were limitations of this study, such as a lack of a control group, and also future research necessary to make definitive conclusions on the probiotics, like a longer experimental period and possible higher concentrations of the probiotics. Lastly, other variables may need to be taken into account, such as carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration, from my research, may be one of the most significant ways in mitigating climate change. This is the process of removing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it. Carbon can be stored in many different ways, all referred to as carbon sinks, meaning that they absorb more carbon than they emit. For example, the ocean stores copious amounts of carbon. In the 2010s, it was stored on average 9.5 billion tons of carbon. Yet the ocean cannot withstand holding this increasing abundance of carbon, causing ocean acidification, which can be defined as increases in the pH of water which in turn threatens the stability of marine ecosystems. It is evident that we mustn't look at the ocean for the answer, but rather the soil. Both soil and plants are able to successfully store carbon in abundant amounts without inflicting harm onto their ecosystems. In recent years, we have seen a significant rise in mitigating climate change through plants and forestry. This has caused the large initiative that has been taking place for the past few decades in planting extensive amounts of trees. Through photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is able to bind to plants and be stored, which can be represented by carbon being one of the greatest components in the composition of a plant. Furthermore, when carbon is stored in soil, it is typically in forms of soil organic carbon or carbonates. Soil organic carbon promotes soil and plant health and is able to be stored for a few decades. And while this is significant, carbonates are able to store carbon for more than 70,000 years. For carbonates to form, it takes a long period of time, which is exactly why scientists are aiming to accelerate this process. Additionally, soil and plants are able to benefit from these increases in carbon in their system, and this is evidently seen through the influence it has on nutrient cycling and water retention, which ultimately leads to increases in plant growth. In 2018, about 25% of fossil fuel emissions were removed by the soil and stored in the soil. The implications of increasing this percentage would be remarkable in ensuring a future for our planet. Since microorganisms have the capabilities to capture and store carbon, there's an increasing need to test the application of different combinations of microorganisms to come to a resolution. Applications are necessary not only for carbon capture, but the extensive ecosystems throughout the world that are being impacted by anthropogenic activities. Anthropogenic activities can be defined as human activities that result in environmental contamination or excess production of pollution. These activities are typically more abundant in urban areas, leading to the few areas of soil throughout the cities vulnerable to contamination. This is a growing issue, as with the increases in human population, there's inevitable increases in urbanization and industrialization. Typical urban soil stressors include traffic and industrial emissions. Stormwater runoff will then transfer all these contaminants into the soil, and as a result, heavy metals will often contaminate the soil, such as arsenic, cadmium, lead, and zinc. This soil contamination will decrease the soil's ability to effectively carry out necessary functions by decreasing the microbial diversity and soil fertility. This threatens the stability of our urban ecosystems, which are essential in sustaining the plants and animals that occupy the city, and stormwater management. One solution to this issue is the addition of microorganisms into the soil that are capable of tolerating the toxicity of the soil and dissolve heavy metals through microbial metabolic activities. The removal of contaminants from the soil by microorganisms is known as bioremediation. There has been extensive research on the application of microorganisms or even soil amendments to promote the health of soil by the removal of contaminants. Oftentimes, urban ecosystems are overlooked but are the most in need, which is why it is imperative that there's a greater incentive to promote the health and stability of urban soils. Thus, the application of microorganisms or soil amendments are a viable option to help mitigate the effects of urbanization and promote the natural ecosystems of the world. Most significantly, we must realize that soil cannot do this alone. Humans must take action by continuing to develop soil probiotics or other supplements to promote these processes, like soil amendments or alternative agricultural practices. Change will not be feasible. By further developing soil probiotics like microbial inoculants or biostimulants, we can reach a more sustainable future. Other practices that can promote soil health and carbon sequestration include applying compost, increasing cover crop diversification, and crop rotation in agricultural fields. This is truly just the start, and being able to expand on this research is imperative. Thus, identifying the magnitude of which the soil can help aid the planet to create a more sustainable future elucidates that not all solutions to climate change are surface level, rather they are underneath us. Thank you. Are there any questions?
So with these plant probiotics, or soil probiotics, would you mostly want to see them being used in actual agricultural fields such as farming, or even in just plant gardens or in city gardens?
I mean, they can be used in like a variance of things. I know that for a fact that they're already being used in agricultural fields now. You can actually purchase microbial inoculants, biostimulants, or soil amendments at like Home Depot or on the internet. So they are for sale. But the more like pressing issue is that they aren't really being looked at, and it isn't really like, I guess like people don't really have their minds on it. And it's like, this is kind of like more of a pressing issue because we don't really think about it, but the soil is kind of like sustains us as like humans. Everything that grows from the soil we eat basically. And urban soils specifically, like they have heavy contaminants. It's not uncommon, you know, stormwater runoff is becoming an increasing issue. And you know, if nothing is done about that, then it's just, we are not going to be able to use these soils at all. Any other questions? Oh, there's.
I just wanted to ask, as children, what do you think we could do to reduce carbon emission?
You can, I guess, be sustainable in the way you treat soil. That can include like not littering or even having your own garden at home where you practice like sustainable management of the soil and ensure the health of the soil through adding, you can add compost that you can make at home. You can add soil amendments that you can buy on the market and such. Okay. Oh. Oh.
Isabella, thank you. So on long walks during the pandemic, Mark Manley and his wife were really struck by the sheer amount of plastic that they were seeing washing up on the shores of Long Island Sound. And that got them to thinking. That observation actually led to a year of research and of testing. They wanted to determine how they could improve the recycling situation. And through that work, Mark learned that actually more than half of bottles and cans, the ones that we can actually return for a deposit here in New York, they end up in landfills or in the ocean. So many of us choose, myself included, the ease of just throwing them into that blue recycling bin that we put out once a week. But as we probably all know, I call myself an aspirational recycler. I kind of hope that all my washed out things are getting recycled. But the reality is, most of those things going into that bin, there's no way to guarantee that they are actually going to be recycled. And so putting all of that together is how MeCycle was born. So MeCycle will actually return your bottles and cans. That ensures they don't end up in landfills, they don't end up in the oceans, they actually get recycled. And as for those deposits, well, you could keep that money, or they can help you donate it to worthwhile causes in the community. So to learn a little bit more, please welcome your fellow Larchmont resident, Mark Manley.
Hello, and thanks for sticking with us, and it's been a long afternoon. Appreciate your time here. I'm actually going to not talk quite about recycling and MeCycle just yet. I've had a long career in sustainability, and a lot of it was in renewable energy, energy efficiency, electric vehicles. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and the changes that I've seen since I was in high school, and sort of give you a sense of kind of the hope that you can have. So climate change and other environmental issues like sea level rise, water and air pollution, or eliminating plastic waste, which I love doing, can seem quite daunting. But I think we can all be truly hopeful that changes can be made in your lifetimes that will solve these problems. Oh, all right. So LED lighting. When I was in high school, an LED light was a large, kind of clunky button-like knob that gave off a dim red light. It wasn't very useful. You used them in calculators or clock radios. And about 15 years ago, LED bulbs emerged that you could use in your home and in a lamp fixture. But they were bulky and almost cost $100 each. So, but today, it's about all you can find in the hardware store. So I like to highlight this as the the changes that can happen in a generation. These LED bulbs use about 7 times less energy and last 10 times longer than a regular incandescent bulb. So innovation and change is definitely possible and happen. Brian talked about a lot of that earlier. So good policy helps as well, and it plays an important nudge. In 2007, the EPA introduced limits on incandescent light bulb sales, and that helped drive the LED market to scale up in size and build the production capacity. So industry-changing solutions like this, are complex. They do take a lot of time, and we all need to be patient and persistent. We heard about a project earlier that took a long, long time to get built. Of course, green solutions also need to make financial sense. Economists tell us that competitive product pricing depends very much on getting enough market scale to make mass production feasible, and those famous economies of scale. Government policy helps accelerate adoption, or in the case of lighting, limit the sale of less efficient incandescent bulbs, and create the demand for the industry to invest in that production capacity. Electric vehicles started with heavy lead-acid batteries and needed light loads and limited range. The golf cart we all know. In the early 90s, the auto industry invested heavily in fuel cells, a kind of reverse battery that was fueled by hydrogen to power electric motors. Hydrogen proved hard to compress and store on a small space in a vehicle. Plus, we needed to build out a completely new distribution infrastructure for hydrogen fuel. So a few years later, really interesting innovation happened. The industry, a couple of players in the industry decided that rather than strive for an all-electric vehicle, we focus on a hybrid model. We could significantly improve gas mileage and also reduce CO2 emissions by adding a small battery with an assistive electric motor. The hybrid EV was born. So in 2012, the Toyota Prius was the 3rd best-selling car in the world. Millions of hybrids cut more emissions than a few 10,000 fuel cell cars. And perhaps a greater outcome of this innovation, I guess, was approach that it created huge demand for lithium-ion batteries and really kind of kick-started tremendous growth and innovation in battery storage. So that now we're seeing fully electric vehicles throughout the US and certainly all over this New York suburb. Tax credits for both consumers and manufacturers were really an important policy incentive here that helped this market as well. So now EVs have reached a key tipping point, 5% market share in the US, that should really accelerate further adoption. Other markets are even further ahead. China has reached over 25% market share for electric and plug-in hybrid cars there. We'll talk a little bit about solar as well. You've already heard a lot, but 30 years ago, solar cells were used to power remote equipment, cottages, and even basic calculators. But at over $10 a watt cost, solar was nowhere near economical for grid-connected power applications. And at the dawn of this millennium, Germany and Japan, both countries that import vast amounts of energy, really don't have their own natural resources for energy, created attractive incentive programs for solar power plants and residential installations. This ramped up global solar equipment production, panels, inverters, racking, and created the beginnings of a workforce trained to install these new technologies. California, Spain, New Jersey, and many other states and countries followed with their own incentive programs to further grow the industry. And you heard this before, so that today utility-scale solar is lower cost than coal and less than half the cost of natural gas power. Solar is also the largest and fastest growing source of new generation capacity in the US. So, addressing environmental challenges isn't just happening at the national level with policy and industry changing and innovation. Climate change affects local communities just as much. We heard also earlier, we've seen severe rainfall flood entire neighborhoods right here in this community, and just witnessed a full winter with only 1 day of snow. Actions are also happening here. For over a decade, we've had a robust set of volunteer organizations in the local villages and town. They've accomplished some worthwhile initiatives together, and sometimes having a little friendly competition amongst the different groups helps as well. We heard about the really great plastic ban earlier. So, Town of Mamaroneck Sustainability Collaborative, the Village of Larchmont Environmental Committee, and the Village of Mamaroneck Committee for the Environment are 3 local volunteer groups that advise their respective municipal governments on sustainability issues, both policy and just sort of technically as well. So sometimes these efforts snowball. We heard about one earlier, and catch on in other jurisdictions. Larchmont issued its plastic bag ban in 2013, with other towns and counties following in later years. And that culminated in a statewide ban of single-use plastic shopping bans in March of 2020. The CoLab for the town of Mamaroneck helped draft the November 2021 Climate Emergency Declaration, which calls on the town to examine all laws, budgets, and planned activities with the climate crisis in mind. This action was inspired by similar declarations made by our neighboring city, New Rochelle, and thousands of other municipalities, countries, and even the European Union. Other times, we see multiple municipalities join force. A number of initiatives in our community benefit from this type of collaboration: composting programs, food waste collection, hybrid refuse trucks, bike-friendly roadways, and a co-op purchasing effort called Solarize that 75 homes in the Little Tri-Village Muni area here use to install solar systems on their roofs. I want to dive down on a local project here a little bit more. These still take persistence and time to get identified, identifying the need and the opportunity, and then finally implementing a solution. In 2021, a 483 kilowatt community solar system that helps supply power to over 100 households in the area was commissioned on the roof of the Homick skating rink just a half-mile south of here. Construction only took a few months, but getting the project selected, all parties signed up, and ready to build took 3 years, plus the support of a forward-looking, thinking town administration and the perseverance of expert volunteers from the town's CoLab. After learning about the community solar model, the town reviewed proposals and several bidders in 2018. But proving the merits of this model to the full town board, negotiating the contracts with suppliers, and getting the right permits took a couple more years until construction finally started in the beginning of 2021. Big projects can get done at the local level, but they do take time and hard work as well. So what are some of the other systematic changes we as a society and you as our next generation of future innovators can work on? Creating a truly circular economy for all our packaged goods. You heard about this a little bit before too. In America, aluminum recycling has fallen below 50%, despite being an ideal package material that can be infinitely recycled. Even worse, we recycle only 10% of all plastic produced. Remember, plastics are made from oil and thus have a significant carbon intensity. The system failure leads to 97 billion pounds per year of plastic in the US going into landfills, oceans, and the atmosphere. About 300 pounds per person per year. One of the best ways to cut these losses is to implement deposit return systems, where consumers are incentivized to properly recycle their containers. A similar approach, called extended producer responsibility, EPR, makes manufacturers of goods, drinks, food, household products responsible for recycling the items in their packaging. Currently, there are 3 proposed EPR bills in the New York legislature, so I encourage you to take a look at those and get in touch with your local representatives to support those. And then more locally, schools are looking at adding solar systems to their roofs, more energy efficiency measures, and of course we need residents just to keep reminding your school boards and administrators that these are high payback investments and something they should keep looking at. And then lastly, talk a little bit more about electric vehicles, but as more families buy EVs, we're going to need additional EV charging options. Shopping areas, apartments, restaurants, sport clubs, I think are all great places to add this kind of infrastructure, and we can do that all around the community here. I missed advancing my slides. Oh, yeah. But seeing positive outcomes to environmental threats can seem elusive, and building sustainable improvements can certainly take time, but persistence pays off. And I think you as our future leaders are going to make really great progress here. Oh, going back too fast. So again, just the 3 key aspects I wanted to share where you can get involved. Community programs, as an innovator, like some of the young folks we heard up here today, kind of creating, designing, and implementing new technologies, or policy making at the local, state, county, too, or national levels. And I want you to realize that change, can definitely happen in your lifetime, just as I've seen it happen in mine. Thanks. I'll stick around for any questions. I think there's one there, maybe, yeah.
In the intro, it said that the recycling rate countrywide is really poor, but I thought in Westchester we actually have a very good recycling rate. Can you address that?
Sure, absolutely. Westchester is one of the few places where we have a dual stream system. So that means you separate containers, glass, plastic, and aluminum in one bin, and then paper in another bin. And the school here just implemented that division of separation as well here. So hopefully we're going to see that improve at the school too, at the high school. So that helps with when those items are taken to the facilities to further sort those out. That helps with that. And I think as a community we're pretty good at understanding the benefits of recycling. Unfortunately, just as a whole, though, and I think the rates are, maybe around 30% here, so maybe not kind of 10% like they are elsewhere, and it depends on the material types too. And part of the issues is that, and this is what we do as a company at MeCycle, we have a mobile app technology that helps people kind of scan a barcode and decipher what they should do with their recycling. But for example, there are containers that have plastic film wraps on them. I just switched the dishwasher rinse agent in my dishwasher the other day, and like the whole container is wrapped in the film wrap. And when that goes to a sorting facility, the scanners there look at it and go, "Oh, that's plastic film. We don't recycle that." It gets rejected and ends up in the landfill. The container inside, and it's perfectly normal. Now, I think part of the problem is you're not going to take a knife and end up in the ER because you've stabbed yourself trying to remove that. But unfortunately, we need innovation around packaging and how things are packaged. But also, maybe further innovation in how things are sorted, or with these EPR type rules and kind of specific return to store or other specific return type programs improve that. One of the biggest challenges in recycling is separating out all the different materials that we have. And so, our thesis at MeCycle is that source separation is really the best place to do that, and then keep things separated right from the home where they're generated. One more question.
Oh. How do we get more information about MeCycle and sort of how to sign up for that?
Sure. MeCycle.com, that's me-cycle.com is a great place to start. You can go there. Yeah, that's probably the best spot to go. All right. Well, thanks very much.
So up next here we have Anissa Tan. She's a senior at Mamaroneck High School. She's also co-president of Eco-Reps, which is the school's environmental and sustainability club. And she comes by her passion for the environment, quite honestly, by way of her mom, who began volunteering for the town's sustainability collaborative, which you just heard a little bit about, when Anissa was in middle school. She's now volunteering as well, lending her time to efforts like Love Your Food and Healthy Yards. You may have seen some of those signs cropping up around town. Right now, she's focused on MHS Earth Week. So she is organizing a series of events through Eco-Rep, leading up, of course, to Earth Day, which is a week from today. So she's pretty busy. So we're glad that she had some time to spend here this afternoon. She's also gearing up for her senior internship this spring. She's going to be doing that at the New York Botanical Gardens Edible Academy. If you're lucky, maybe you took your kids on a field trip there when they were in elementary school. I know I got to. She's going to be focused on gardening and plant ecosystems, and she's hoping to study environmental sciences in college as well. So please welcome Anissa Tan.
Hi everyone, again, my name is Anissa Tan. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. And I'm one of the co-presidents of EcoReps, Mamaroneck High School's Environmental and Sustainability Club. Today, I'm here to talk to you all about what I've learned during my time at EcoReps and how we as a community can apply our learning to work towards a more sustainable future together. There's a well-known proverb that goes a little something like this: it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to raise a child and a community to make a positive environmental impact. Coming into the high school and joining EcoReps as a freshman was a really exciting time for me. I was already ambitious about promoting environmental sustainability, and I was ready to take action. I soon learned just how important it is that everyone has these shared ambitions and sense of responsibility. It has been the act of trying to convince people to share this environmental ambition with me that has been one of EcoReps' greatest struggle as a club. One of the most important days of the year for Mamaroneck High School, for every Mamaroneck High School club, if not the most important day of the year, is Club Fair. I'm sure many of you already know about Club Fair and what it is, but if you don't, I am going to give you a quick rundown. In October of each year, the presidents and representatives of almost all of the MHS clubs convene on the track and essentially prepare to hassle their fellow students into joining their club. Some clubs prepare candy, others display their trophies and award plaques. Basically, we do whatever it takes to fill our rosters. This year, EcoReps, founded by 3 class of 2022 alumni, was in desperate need of new members, considering that most of our previous members had since graduated. The club fair this year ran as anticipated, with our big green sign, a brief explanation of our mission, and an appropriate amount of peer pressure. The EcoReps table had a total of 3 loose leaf sheets with student names and email addresses filled out by the end of the lunch period. It felt good. When we held our first club meeting in room A206, all of the tables and seats in the classroom were filled. I like to describe EcoReps as an environmental action-based club. Many of our activities consist of helping to better educate our fellow MHS students and faculty about the importance of wasting less, recycling properly, and being aware that individual actions towards a more sustainable future really do matter. We produce videos to encourage anti-idling practices, run bake sales to raise money for events such as World Oceans Day, organize cleanups on school grounds and also at local parks, and organize clothing drives to promote sustainable fashion and reusing, reducing, and recycling. Considering the action aspect of EcoReps, our club members really are the backbone of the entire operation. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. This simple fact is both our greatest strength as well as our greatest weakness. Generating interest at the club fair was great, but one thing we quickly realized was that a significant number of people would only show up for the first meeting and unfortunately never come back. Sorry, 1 second, okay. The limited number of current committed members leaves holes in the EcoReps agenda, and to be honest, I can sometimes become demoralized and even frustrated by the lack of influence that it can feel that our club has. Every second always counts when it comes to climate change, as I'm sure you all know, and for me, it can feel like precious seconds are ticking away. In late November and early December, EcoReps launched an anti-idling campaign at the high school. We noticed that students who would come to school to get a parking spot in the post parking lot, where you all park today, were sitting in their cars and idling. As a senior myself, I can attest to the fact that the competition for a spot in the post parking lot is very fierce every morning, but the emissions from idling release additional carbon dioxide into the air and pose a threat to our lung health when we inhale it. In order to address this idling issue, we as a club brainstormed potential solutions. We plan to try and bring students into the building by hosting hot chocolate events in the mornings, making a no idling banner to hang in the parking lot, and even talking with the school administration to try and get permanent anti-idling signs in the parking lots. We had attempted a very similar project last school year, but hadn't been able to properly distribute information. This year, we wanted to give it another shot. We swiftly got the project off the ground and even made a promotional video that was aired for the whole school to see. We also managed to speak to the administration about the issue. Our goal had been to target idling during the winter months, but slowly and surely, winter turned into spring. When I look back at the beginning of this campaign, I see a group of students who are eager to solve a problem. But as we all got busier with our AP classes, our sports, and our other extracurricular activities, we naturally veered off the path we had created. We each look at finishing the project as a daunting task, which is why it ended up on hold in the first place. There were so many things to do and so little time if we wanted to get the project out as fast as possible, and we forgot that if each club member worked on one small task, we could combine that work to make a finished project. As disappointing as it was that we weren't able to see the project through in the timeline that we had wanted, I'm very hopeful we will be able to complete it later this year in preparation for next winter. We still have the banner design in storage, and I'm confident that it will one day hang on the fence behind the bleachers for all of the post parking lot to see. The club members we currently have are amazing, talented, and ambitious alone, but have the ability to do much more when they work together. The trials and tribulations that EcoReps has faced trying to recruit club members and complete projects seems to be a very common trend among environmental groups. As an individual, I have my own hopes and dreams for the future, but as a co-president, I have learned that I cannot force other people to share my dreams and hopes. I've learned that I cannot make people care more. I can only help to educate and encourage them so that they themselves can care more. The sheer scale of combating the issue of climate change does not allow room for the unmotivated and uninspired. My older brother is a prime example of this. Despite having grown up in the same household as me, he treats climate change in a vastly different way than I do. He doesn't believe that individual actions make a significant difference and therefore can become lazy when it comes to remembering to turn off the lights and even composting properly. And I do understand this argument. When it comes to an issue as gigantic as climate change looming in front of us, it can make us feel that as individuals, only one of the 8 billion people on planet Earth, we can't possibly make a difference in the large scheme of things. But we can, and we have been. Our influence can be seen in new rules proposed by the Biden administration to ensure that a majority of new passenger cars sold in the United States are electric instead of gas-powered by 2032. Our influence can be seen in the thousands of teenagers and adults who protest for a cleaner and greener future, not only in New York and the United States, but also across the world. Our influence can be seen right here in our community because everyone here today and everyone who came earlier was invested enough in our future and our planet to be able to listen to all of the speakers that came out here today. It is the collective power that we can all create when we work together that will ultimately create the change and help us not only to protect the natural environment, but to help us regrow it. After all, it takes a community to make a positive environmental impact. If we all make a more conscious effort to save energy at home by taking actions such as switching out old light bulbs into LEDs and even investing in renewable energy for homes instead of oil or gas, if we make a more conscious effort to waste less by buying less in the first place, and if we all make a more conscious effort to speak up and talk with our friends and neighbors about the climate crisis and spread the word, then we can all make real progress together. Thank you. Not sure if anyone has questions, but if you do. Yes.
First, I just wanted to say thank you for your devotion to environmental initiatives. We all in the community appreciate it very much. I was wondering if you could suggest one thing that each one of us could change based on all of the variety of initiatives that you've worked on. What do you think is the most impactful and easiest personal action that we can each take to make a difference? Thank you.
In our community in particular, we do have a composting program. One of the main issues that I have found through my research of climate change is just how much we, as an entire population, buy and then end up wasting so much of the stuff we buy. So I think the most important part is really cutting it down at the source. But since that takes some time and you need to get comfortable with that sort of mindset, we do have a composting program in this town where on a food level, you can take the excess food that you bought and maybe got bad in your refrigerator or something like that. And you can compost it and return it for energy that the earth can use to therefore grow new plants, which I think is just like the whole concept of recycling and reusing that we really want to see more of when it comes to fighting climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. So our last speaker today, I think you're just going to be maybe a little bit blown away, because maybe it's something you haven't thought of before. He's an aerospace engineer, a pilot, a flight instructor, and with that kind of experience, Kyle Clark is really hoping to change the way that we fly. He's the founder and the CEO of Beta Technologies, and he and his team are working to decarbonize aviation with an all-electric, net zero aircraft and a cross-country network of charging infrastructure to support that. So their focus is on, understandably, safety, efficiency, and sustainability. They already have 2 multi-state missions and near daily test flights. Beta has actually already secured orders for its innovative electric aircraft from UPS, United Technologies, and Air New Zealand. So Kyle, by the way, also played in the NHL, right wing, fittingly, I think, for the Washington Capitals. So it's great to have him here. He came down from Vermont just for this event. So please welcome Kyle Clark.
All right, all right. It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'm just going to try and go quick. I know everybody wants to get out of here, but I'm going to tell a quick story, and maybe you take something away from it, maybe you don't. Just thrilled to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about electric airplanes. That intro was like way out of date, funnily enough. I heard 2 interstate missions. Now we're doing it like twice a week. And this is the building of an aerospace company. So I'm just going to rewind a little ways. Way back when, for as long as I can remember, I loved airplanes. And when I was about 16, 15 years old, I ran up to the airport and I helped these guys fix their airplanes to get rides in the airplane. And this isn't me, but this is this guy right here. Right before, he jumped in with me, and he did exactly what I did when I was that age. The first guy who took me up an airplane after fixing this airplane for a test flight, we got off the runway, he flipped it over upside down, he flew the canopy back, and he said, "We're just getting the M&Ms out." And we took off, and we did a whole aerobatic flight, and I was totally hooked. I was totally hooked. So I found something that I loved. It was flying. And I couldn't, every time my parents came to me and said, "What do you want for Christmas? What do you want for your birthday?" All I would say is an airplane. I just want an airplane. I want to go flying. I want an airplane. And everything I thought about was an airplane. So this is in high school. And funny enough, I wanted 2 things. There was this beautiful girl. Her name was Katie. She was funny, humorous, and I wanted to marry her, and I wanted to design and build airplanes. And I did both of those things, which is really, really fun. So this is him on the back end of that flight, and I hope that he gets inspired to do what I did. This project, this entire company, was my senior engineering project, interestingly enough. And at the time, I had this idea of reinventing the way that people would interface with an airplane and to reduce its overall emissions by increasing its efficiency, go hybrid, the first step. And it won, ironically, the thesis of the year. And I pitched it to everybody that would listen. And nobody would invest in my company. Everybody thought it was this crazy idea. And this is 20 plus years ago. And I kept pitching it and pitching it. And during that time, I kept refining what I was pitching and massaging this idea. And finally, in 2017, fast forward 15 years from the first time that I pitched it, I'm in Philadelphia, and I'm pitching to this table of people on electric aviation. And this one gal in the audience says, "Who are you and where are you from?" And I said, "I'm Kyle from Vermont." And she goes, "Are you getting paid to be here?" And I'm like, "Oh, geez, I must sound like a real idiot." And I go, "No." She goes, "I can tell, because you're really excited about this electric airplane thing. We should talk." Well, that Friday, I went to her house after 18 hours together. She said, "I'll tell you what, go home, write down what you want to do, and send it to me." And after spending all this time together, I went home and I painted a watercolor. I wrote all over the watercolor. And I said, "This is what I want to do." And I sent it to her at 4 a.m. I slept for a couple hours. I went out in the garage. I was working on a motorcycle, and my wife comes out with a phone. And she goes, "You might want to check your text." And all it said is, "You're on." And I'm like, all right. Now, it was just me. I've got nobody with me doing this. I had started a bunch of power electronics business, doing things that were on the tangents of what I loved, but now I was on to go build an electric airplane. So fast forward 8 months later. 8 months, it's not a lot of time. A team of 8 of us designed, built, and flew the largest electric airplane to have ever flown in the world. We flew at 100 test flights, and it attracted a whole lot of attention, including somebody right down the street here, who is partners with a few people in the audience here. And they believed in the vision of designing, building, and flying an electric airplane. Well, after flying that, we realized that that was not a commercially viable product. That was something that would expose the benefits of electric propulsion, but also expose the detriments. You had these heavy batteries that just really weren't fit to fly big airplanes long distances. So in reflection, I started thinking about what are the key elements in first principle physics, and this teacher over here will probably appreciate this. Very first principle. How does an airplane fly? Well, it's got to push itself through the air, create lift without a lot of drag. So make the drag really low and make a lot of lift. So the lift over drag ratio has to be the maximum number. If you're going to put batteries on it, put high energy density batteries. We all know our phones are getting better and better over years, but that energy density has to be as maximum as it possibly can. And then leave a lot of extra weight on the airplane to put a lot of batteries on it. These are really not complicated things, right? And that's a low empty weight fraction, using material science and engineering to make a really light airframe. And the one a lot of people forget about is then convert that precious energy in the battery to thrust really efficiently. And I won't get into all this science here, but this airplane that we designed, built, and by the way, this is a big airplane. It looks big on the screen, but in real life, that tip to tip is almost that door to that door. It's a big airplane, 7,000 pounds, 50-foot wingspan, 44 feet long, 14 feet tall, carries 3,000 pounds of batteries, 15,000 little cells that we see, they're called 21700 cells like they're in a Tesla car, 15,000 cells, about 5 times as much energy as in a Tesla. We just flew this airplane 336 nautical miles on one charge, and I landed with 51 miles in the bank, because you got to always have reserves. That's like a long ways. That's sitting in that cockpit for 3 hours. It cost $17 in electricity. We were chasing it with a Caravan, which is a traditional gas-burning airplane, $700 of fuel in the Caravan. So now there's no green premium. The gentleman that was up here first, Brian, he educated us about wind turbines and offshore wind, and he said, look, it's less than the cost of the other sources of energy. That's really important. It makes the adoption really easy. We have enough to deal with. We're getting over that regulatory hump and the permitting humps and the technological humps. At the other side of it, it has to be sustainable and it has to be economically beneficial. So we are focused on making an environmentally sustainable, economically beneficial airplane, exploiting all the benefits of electric propulsion while respecting the detriments. I'm just going to point out one aerodynamic feature. You notice, so the way this works, by the way, those 4 propellers on the top, they lift the aircraft up off a nice little red circle like this. Once it's in the air, that pusher at the back starts pushing it forward, and as it goes through the air, about 30 seconds later, it's going fast enough that you can turn those rotors on the top off, and you stow them like little aerodynamic, javelins through the wind. And the thing flies for a couple hours, gets to where it's going, and it lands on a dot like this. The idea of infrastructure there is almost insignificant. You got a charger at each end, you got a dot. There's no roads, there's no development, there's no anything. You're using the Z dimension of the world like you've never used it before. It's magical. You took away the runway, you take away the fuel, and by the way, it's really quiet. You took away the noise. The 3 most annoying things about aviation are gone. So that's why I'm excited about the product. But then you got to go do something meaningful. The first application is going hospital to hospital. Really high value cargo needs to go to a vertical landing pad. So our first customer is United Therapeutics, like the intro said. And they make organs and blood products and pharmaceuticals. UPS has ordered a bunch of these. They ordered 150 of these to move packages. If you ship something here today, speaking of energy efficiency, to Buffalo, New York, you know where that package goes? It goes over to Newark, goes down to Philly, goes down to Louisville, goes out. It goes like 1,400 miles when it could go direct to Buffalo. Guess what? In a few years, it's going to go direct to Buffalo. with zero emissions. It's really an exciting time to be working in transportation. Aviation right now, this is a theme of stats, I think, here today, is 9% of all transportation. Transportation is the biggest producer of carbon emissions. It's 9%. Funny thing is, as we learned, cars are going electric. We hit this tipping point that the gentleman just spoke about. Marine's going electric and getting more efficient. All other forms of transportation, motorcycles going electric. Aviation isn't going electric yet. Well, it's on our watch it will. It's not going electric yet. And if we don't do anything about it, it will be the #1 producer of carbon emissions by 2035. Because everybody else is going electric, and we, as aviators, operate in this cognitive dissonance of sustainability because there is no option. Well, we're creating an option. So this airplane takes off and lands vertically. It flies like an airplane. This is a special picture to me because this is flying over Huffman Prairie. Anybody know what Huffman Prairie is? It's the first place the Wright brothers did a full circuit of an airport. So we're flying across the country here, flying right over the place the Wright brothers did this. And this is flying over the Adirondacks, just north of here. So what we've created, this airplane, and I'm going to bring this back full circle. I love aviation. I love flying. I fly 3 to 4 airplanes a day, helicopters, parasails, gliders, airplanes. Every chance I get to fly with somebody, I do. We had 83 interns last summer. I flew with nearly every single one of them in an aerobatic plane. It's something I love to share with people. I care about climate change. I care about sustainability. It's something that actually didn't really come to me until I was about 30 years old, and I was like, holy shit, I really do, excuse me, holy cow, I really do care about this. And I said, I've got a place now I can apply what I love in a place that I care about. And putting those two things together, and by the way, then surrounding yourself with a lot of people who care about sustainability, care about aviation, maybe have this insatiable desire of technology. And by the way, if you ever interview at our company, all I do is listen for those 3 things. Can they not get enough technology? Do they love aviation? Do they love sustainability? Do they care about the environment? And by the way, they don't need all 3 of those. They just need 2 of them. Because mathematically, if everybody in the company has 2 out of those 3, then you share a passion with everybody in the company. And when you align yourselves with common passions, complementary skill sets, you get an energetic culture of drive and perseverance. Again, like it took me 15 years of pitching this before somebody said, oh yeah, that sounds good. That persistence of getting it done to make sure people heard it. And people ask me often, like, did you think it would grow to a company? You know, they gave me $1 billion to go do this. It's crazy. They trusted me with that money. Ever think they would do that? I was like, yeah, of course I did. I've been telling you that for 15 years. Come on. And now we're actually doing it. And with that money, and one other cool thing here is we're not just doing it on the airplane. We broke ground 1.5 years ago on the largest net zero building east of the Mississippi up in Vermont. Solar power, geothermally heated and cooled to build our airplanes in. This is almost 500,000 square feet when it's complete to produce our airplanes without using any energy that's not produced on site, which is really, really important to our overall impact on the environment. So this is a picture of, we've got 500 direct employees, about 1,500 indirect contractors working to fulfill this vision and create aviation. The culture is strong. The people are all driven towards something. This picture is special because we just graduated from a research and development ticket to a market survey ticket on our way to full certified commercial operations. Market survey means you fly, like we just did. Actually, we flew down to Westchester not too long ago, did a demo flight down there with electric airplanes in Class Bravo airspace, where you're working at the convenience of the controllers. The controllers tell you to go up, they tell you to go down, they tell you left, go right, give you a heading, tell you to hold. You've got to have a really reliable, safe product. To do that over a whole bunch of people, which takes thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of test, and do it at the convenience of a controller, which means you don't get to choose where you're going. You're going to go where they tell you to go, and do it right in the New York City area. So this is a cool picture for me because it expresses that graduation. So that's all I got. Find something you love what you do, and have a purpose behind it and something that you care about. You put those 2 things together. The energy at the company, the energy that is behind this is almost unstoppable. And as a visitor yesterday, it probably would be inappropriate for me to say, huge potential customer came yesterday and they said, wow, Textron better watch out. And that was a huge compliment. By the way, Textron owns Cessna and Beechcraft and Hawker, and that's the position we're in. And I think the whole world should watch out, because we're nipping on the heels of fuel-burning aircraft. We'll be nipping on the heels of single aisle and then wide bodies. And in our lifetime, we're going to create an electric aviation ecosystem. Thank you. I don't know if I get any questions. Yes, sir.
The geographies here.
Yeah, the U.S., the people in the U.S. are, I think, pretty excited about it. I mean, Jill Biden came to our place the other day, and she came up to the airplane, and she's like, I had no idea that we were this far. This is really exciting. She's excited. I testified to Congress the other day, and they were excited. But the regulatory environment that we have in place is a massive impediment to innovation. And this is why I was testifying to Congress, talking about reauthorization, where to put our efforts in the regulatory environment. The FAA, many regulatory bodies, they are not incentivized to adopt new technologies. Unfortunately, we just signed an agreement in the UAE, and this is over in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, to start service, right? And I wish we were doing that in the US. So to answer your question, is not good enough, but there's a lot of momentum, and like listening to this today, there's a lot of like awareness that this is really important. I think people are growing in awareness of how pollutive traditional aviation is, and we have to do something about it. Like, safety is all relative. When the thing we're attacking is climate change, and the mere existence of our world, we got to take risks to incorporate technologies, or we got to be inconvenienced, however you want to call it, to adopt those. So I think our regulatory mindset has to change. But great question. Any other questions? Uh-oh, am I going to get a chemistry question?
Well, I just want to say that, I appreciate learning so much today about all the presenters. And this shows that the world is going towards really sustainable energy and development. And, if you don't follow that, any country that's not following that is going behind. And I see that in Senegal, they just, in the western countries of Africa, they're just starting to discover a lot of oil there. And they're very excited about discovering oil. I'm like, oh my God, this is not probably, after watching this, that's the wrong direction. But so thank you everyone for presenting, and thank you for talking to us about your new innovation in aviation. And I just see that very interesting. And I just have a question about your cockpit, because one day I did a cockpit inside a plane, and I was like, this is not the type of job for me, because it was so small, I was squeezing myself, and I see he's a very tall guy, So is your cockpit big or small? Like, how do you fit in there?
That's a great question. So by FAA standards, we have visibility, safety, egress for the 5th percentile to the 95th percentile, and that's about right here. I'm 255 pounds, 6'8", right? So our cockpit is quite spacious. I put a flight helmet on, and I still fit in there, and that's by design. But it's a trade, right? Frontal area on an airplane slows you down. You put a big cockpit up there, and it's not as efficient, unfortunately. But I want to fly it. So, but I want to address the first thing that you said, and the motivation. And there was this interesting thesis that I presented not too long ago, which is, we have businesses and technologies and things that have, no growth. Some things are declining. And then people start talking about linear growth. And then they're like, oh, I got a business with exponential growth. Well, how about we start something with vertical growth? And how do we do that? And the best example I could think of was the mud flap industry. When all of a sudden the Department of Transportation said all trucks must have mud flaps on. And pa-ching, the mud flap industry just appeared. And it was huge. And everybody needed mud flaps, and they wore out, and we need to replace the mud flaps. And every new OEM had to put mud flaps on their trucks. And what if we were to think about a regulation that demanded electric aviation? We're not going to get it from the regulators. Like I heard somebody say this morning, if you appreciate law or sausages, don't watch how it's made. And in the case of law or regulation, it's a mess to make that stuff. But social regulation can do that. If we all agree that it is socially unconscionable to go and press buy on Amazon and trigger this whole series of events of airplanes and trucks and everything so that I can get my package the next day. And meanwhile, my carbon footprint, I mean, I'm not even thinking about it, but if I do think about it, is huge. Because of me pressing buy, and you say, no, no, no. I want a little button that says 0 carbon emissions on that package that's coming to my house. You fly it in an electric plane, you bring it in an electric car, and you say, that's the only way I'm going to operate. And this whole shaming idea is maybe a little bit too aggressive, but this is a prototype thought, by the way. It's the first time I'm really kind of articulating it. What if we were to say it is unacceptable, folks, to have that gas-powered truck pull up to your house with a package? It's unacceptable. Don't be seen doing it. And then all of a sudden, like all of that transportation, UPS is the #1 fuel user in the United States? Commercial behind the military. Commercial behind the military. And we all think about, I'm not going to take that flight to California. What about all those times you push by, right? I think we need to impose a social regulation on how we interact with the world. And if we do it, I see you looking at your watches. I'm done. I won't rant on my prototype thought anymore. Thank you very much.
I kind of like the prototype thought, and I like that we were all here for the unveiling of it. So that's a great way for us to end, and just a reminder that one idea can lead to so much change. Whether it's making a change on the local level and seeing it grow, whether it's seeing your own idea grow and then ultimately end up in the skies, it is limitless what we all have the possibility to do. And being here today, taking in all of this information, seeing and hearing about this innovation, I hope that you leave truly inspired. A massive thank you to everybody who was here today, who spent their time and their energy putting this together. Maxwell has done just a remarkable, remarkable job. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon.